Good morning all of you. So nice to see you all again. Last session we had talked about the very important concept of physiology of digestion. So we had talked how different enzymes from saliva, stomach, pancreas, intestine and liver help in the breakdown of complex food into simple food. Now we understand how do they get absorbed, and we also focus on a very important logic called as hormones of the gastrointestinal tract. So do we remember stomach gave out gastrin, and gastrin is a locally acting hormone. Gastrin stimulates, if you remember, the peptic cells to give out pepsinogen. And we have other such hormones related to the gastrointestinal tract. So chalo, let's see which these hormones are. There are 4 hormones which are secreted by the gastrointestinal tract. पहले names memorize कर लो. You have gastrin, secretin, cholecystokinin and gastric inhibitory peptide (GIP). Gastrin, secretin, cholecystokinin and gastric inhibitory peptide (GIP). सबसे पहले you have gastrin. Gastrin stimulates the gastric gland for the secretion of hydrochloric acid and pepsinogen. So if you remember, gastric stomach has in it G cells. G cells are found at the base of the rugae, and G cells give out a hormone called as gastrin. And gastrin is a locally acting hormone. It will be released from G cells and it stimulates the peptic cells to give out pepsinogen, and it stimulates the oxyntic or the parietal cells to secrete hydrochloric acid. So gastrin से gastric juice secrete होता है. And you have secretin. Secretin acts on the exocrine pancreas and stimulates secretion of water and bicarbonate ions to form the pancreatic juice. Secretin is given by the intestine and it will act on the pancreas, और pancreas में जो pancreatic juice बन रहा है, secretin will help the pancreatic juice to absorb water and bicarbonate ions. If you remember, water के साथ जब bicarbonate ions होता है, मैंने आपको पहले भी बताया था जब हमने stomach किया था, mucus of the stomach is rich in bicarbonates. And bicarbonate make the pH become alkaline. So secretin will help in the absorption of bicarbonate ions, and in the pancreatic juice bicarbonate ions get added and bicarbonate make the pancreatic juice become very alkaline. If you remember, pH of pancreatic juice is 8.8. So very alkaline. Who will make the pH of pancreatic juice 8.8 very alkaline? The bicarbonate ion. Which hormone helps in absorption of bicarbonate ions into the pancreatic juice? Secretin. So ये याद है. And then you have CCK. Cholecystokinin is secreted again by the intestine, by the duodenum, and it acts on the pancreas and gallbladder and stimulates secretion of pancreatic enzymes and bile juice respectively. If you remember, pancreas produces pancreatic juice. It goes in the duct called as the pancreatic duct. Liver produces bile. It goes into the gallbladder by the cystic duct. And when you eat food and food enters the duodenum, then the food in the duodenum stimulates the duodenum to secrete the hormone called as cholecystokinin, which will contract the pancreatic duct and release pancreatic juice into the intestine. And CCK contracts the gallbladder and secretes bile into the intestine. And we remember, bile and pancreatic juice are the major fluids which help in the digestion of food. So who contracts the gallbladder? Who contracts the pancreatic duct to release bile and pancreatic juice into the duodenum? The hormone called as cholecystokinin. Who produces it? Duodenum. Duodenum से cholecystokinin secrete होता है, gallbladder contract होता है, pancreatic duct contract होता है, and bile and pancreatic juice enter into the duodenum. And we have a hormone called as GIP, gastric inhibitory peptide, which inhibits gastric secretion and motility. Sir, once the stomach has done the churning, pyloric sphincter will relax. Now when the stomach contracts, all the chyle enters from the stomach into the duodenum. And then the pyloric sphincter will close, and the food is now in the duodenum. So sir, अब stomach तो खाली हो गया है. Can you have more secretion of pepsinogen, hydrochloric acid? अभी उसकी जरूरत नहीं है, और अगर बहुत ज्यादा hydrochloric acid secrete होगा, then the stomach will become very acidic. And there is no food also to mix with the hydrochloric acid. तो स्टमक में बहुत ज्यादा एसिडिटी हो सकती है, इसलिए जब फूड एंटर्स द डियोडेनम, डियोडेनम में से सिक्रीट होता है गैस्ट्रिक इनहिबिटरी पेप्टाइड which will oppose गैस्ट्रिन हार्मोन. गैस्ट्रिक इनहिबिटरी पेप्टाइड स्टमक के गैस्ट्रिन हार्मोन को ऑपोज करता है, and it will not allow gastrin to be released. So secretion of gastric juice, that is hydrochloric acid and pepsinogen, will stop. So who helps in the release of hydrochloric acid and pepsinogen? The gastrin. Who inhibits the secretion of hydrochloric acid, pepsinogen, gastric juice secretion? Inhibit कौन करता है? Gastric inhibitory peptide. And you may remember, gastric inhibitory peptide is also called as enterogastro. और ये आपके बुक्स में लिख लेना. It is not given in your notes or in the NCERT. तो ये लिख लेना. What is gastric inhibitory peptide, also known as enterogastro? Gastric inhibitory peptide is called as enterogastro. तो चलो, चार हॉर्मोन्स हमने किए, hormone secreted by your digestive system. And then we have a very important logic. सबसे पहले, sir, just a reminder. Sir, where does food first enter into the buccal cavity? After teeth have masticated the food and tongue has mixed the food with saliva, what is the food now called as bolus? the bolus will pass through the esophagus into the stomach. In the stomach, it will get mixed with hydrochloric acid and the pepsinogen pepsin, and digestion will begin in the stomach. What is that acidic fluid in the stomach called as chyme? And chyme will enter into the small intestine, and Brunner's gland, which is alkaline, bile, which is alkaline, pancreatic juice, which is alkaline, intestinal juice, succus entericus, which is alkaline. What will they convert? Acidic chyme into alkaline chyme. And where will chyme get absorbed? Chyme will get absorbed from the duodenum and jejunum, and whatever will not get absorbed will enter into the large intestine. So इस तरह से food has passed. And then we have absorption. Sir, absorption is the process by which end products of digestion pass through the intestinal mucosa into blood or lymph. So, by absorption, the end products of digestion, complex food has become simple nutrients, and they will get absorbed through the intestine, mainly the jejunum and ileum, into blood or lymph. I hope you remember everything: carbohydrates, proteins, nucleic acid, in other words simple sugar, amino acid, nucleic acid breakdown, nitrogen bases, sugars, phosphates, they all get absorbed in blood. But do you all remember fats, which have now become fatty acid and glycerol? It will not get absorbed by blood. नहीं तो वो blood vessels को choke कर देंगे. So where will fatty acid and glycerol get absorbed? They will get absorbed in the lymph vessels. I hope you remember, called as lacteals. So fat, fatty acid and glycerol, lymph vessels, lacteals में absorb हो जाता है. Absorption is carried out by passive, active और facilitated transport mechanisms. तीन टाइप से absorption होता है: passive, active and facilitated transport. What do you mean by this? Sir, absorption is passive, active, facilitated. In passive absorption, food is absorbed along the concentration gradient. No energy is required. So, sir, food is absorbed along the concentration gradient. So, sir, यहाँ epithelium है, ये है blood और ये है intestine. तो intestine के अंदर all simple sugars, glucose, etc. have been digested, and in the blood you are having less concentration of the nutrients, क्योंकि blood में तो सब relatively कम होता है, वो तो cells में assimilate हो गया है all the nutrients. तो blood में nutrients कम होते हैं, intestine में अभी food digest हुआ है, तो all these substances are in larger amount, and these substances pass from their own higher concentration to their own lower concentration. This is called as diffusion. इसे क्या कहते हैं? Diffusion. तो ये आपने किया है केमिस्ट्री में, स्कूल में. Any substance which passes from its own high concentration to its own low concentration is called as diffusion. Food undergoes diffusion. As a matter of fact, water also passes from high concentration to low concentration by diffusion. इसे osmosis कहते हैं. याद रखना, what is diffusion of water called as? Osmosis. And which substances undergo diffusion? Water undergoes passive absorption or diffusion, and along with water, water-soluble vitamins, vitamin B and vitamin C are water-soluble. तो जब water का diffusion होता है, which is called osmosis, साथ में water-soluble vitamins, vitamin B and vitamin C also undergo diffusion, which is called as passive absorption. And short chain fatty acids. Fatty acids, याद है, fats are broken down into fatty acids and glycerol. तो उसमें fatty acids जो छोटे साइज के हैं, short chain fatty acids get absorbed by passive absorption or diffusion. तो इसे passive absorption कहते हैं. Then we have active absorption. Active absorption is against the concentration gradient for which energy is required. ध्यान से सुनना, glucose, galactose, sodium and some amino acids. Glucose, galactose, sodium and some amino acids. Glucose, सर ये इंटेस्टाइन में ग्लूकोज है और ये सेल मेम्ब्रेन है और ये ब्लड है. ब्लड में ग्लूकोज लेवल्स आर वेरी हाई. तो इंटेस्टाइन में जो ग्लूकोज होता है डाइजेशन होने के बाद उससे भी ज्यादा ग्लूकोज ब्लड में होता है, जो ब्लड शुगर लेवल्स आर वेरी हाई. तो you have to now absorb substances from intestine into blood from low concentration gradient into high concentration gradient against the concentration gradient. So when you have to absorb substances like glucose from low concentration in the intestine to higher concentration in the blood vessels, we are absorbing nutrients against the concentration gradient. That is called as active transport. And for that, we have to spend energy. So, ATPs, adenosine triphosphate, your energy currency, ATP spent होता है, and by spending energy ATP, we will actively absorb glucose from the intestine into your blood vessels against the concentration gradient from low concentration to high concentration. So, passive absorption was from high concentration to low concentration. We didn't need to spend any energy for that. Active absorption is from low concentration to a higher concentration, and for that energy is spent. ATPs are spent. Which substances undergo active absorption? Glucose, galactose, sodium and some amino acids. Amino acids 20 types के होते हैं. तो जब प्रोटीन टूट जाता है 20 types of amino acids होते हैं, उसमें से some amino acids glucose, galactose and sodium ions undergo active absorption. And then we have facilitated transport. Beautiful point. Facilitated transport is same as passive, but it requires the presence of some carrier substances like sodium. And fructose and some amino acids undergo facilitated transport. As a matter of fact, आपके books में लिख लो, along with fructose, some glucose also undergoes facilitated transport. So glucose is actively transported also and facilitated transport also. So these substances are facilitated transport, fructose, some amino acids and glucose. If you remember, of the 20 amino acids, some amino acids undergo active absorption and remaining amino acids undergo facilitated absorption. तो कौन-कौन से सब्सटेंस फैसिलिटेटेड होते हैं? फ्रक्टोज, some amino acids and glucose. What is the meaning of facilitated? It is same as passive but requires the presence of some carrier substance like sodium. तो सर ये है facilitated diffusion. What is facilitated diffusion? Same as passive. So food is getting absorbed from its own higher concentration to its own lower concentration. Food high concentration से low concentration में pass हो रहा है. So you don't need to spend ATP, energy spend नहीं करनी पड़ती है. But fructose cannot pass through the cell membrane. फ्रक्टोज सेल मेम्ब्रेन से पास नहीं हो सकता है. तो फ्रक्टोज क्या करता है? फ्रक्टोज अटैचेस टू अ कैरियर मॉलिक्यूल लाइक सोडियम. कैरियर मॉलिक्यूल लाइक सोडियम को फ्रक्टोज अटैच हो जाता है. सोडियम कैन पास थ्रू द सेल मेम्ब्रेन. तो सोडियम विल पास थ्रू द सेल मेम्ब्रेन and fructose जो उसको attach हो गया था will also pass through the cell membrane along with sodium. So what has sodium acted as a carrier molecule? So sodium acted like a carrier. Sodium has gone from intestine into blood and fructose was attached to sodium. तो absorb हुआ sodium, साथ में फ्रक्टोज उसको स्टिक होके एब्जॉर्ब हो गया. What is this kind of absorption called as facilitated diffusion? So once again, when food is absorbed from high concentration to low concentration, it is called as diffusion, also called passive absorption. Water absorption is called osmosis and no energy is required for that. Active transport, food is absorbed from low concentration to a higher concentration, opposite of passive absorption. And for that we have to spend energy in the form of ATP. And facilitated diffusion is like passive absorption. It passes food from high concentration to low concentration, but that substance cannot pass through cell membrane, so it attaches to carrier molecules like sodium, which then undergoes passive absorption, and along with it fructose or glucose or some amino acids get absorbed. And what is that kind of absorption called as? Facilitated diffusion. So I hope you all have understood this. And sir, यहाँ एक बहुत important point हम लोग कहते हैं. Check this carefully. Fatty acids and glycerol being insoluble cannot be absorbed in blood. Fatty acid और glycerol blood में नहीं जा सकते हैं. तो they are incorporated into small droplets called micelles, which move into the intestinal mucosa they are reformed into very small protein-coated fat globules called as chylomicrons, which are transported into lymph vessels called as lacteals in the villi, and these lymph vessels ultimately release the absorbed substance into bloodstream. Now इसका मतलब क्या है? सर ये है फैट लिपिड मॉलिक्यूल. सबसे पहले bile salt will help in attaching to the lipid molecule and break it into smaller pieces, which is called as emulsification. तो याद है bile salt, sodium taurofolate and sodium glycofolate physically break down fat into smaller molecules, and these smaller molecules are called as micelles. इन्हें micelles कहते हैं. And then bile salt activate lipase, or lipase secreted by pancreatic juice and intestinal juice gets activated by bile salt, and lipase will now help in the breakdown of fat into fatty acids and glycerol. So what do lipids or fat eventually break down to form? Fatty acid and glycerol. उसमें bile salt वापस से emulsified fat, in other words glycerol molecules को stick होते हैं. bile salt glycerol molecules को stick होते हैं, and these are again called micelles. तो ये वापस micelles कहा जाता है, and bile salts transport these glycerol molecules into the cells of the intestine, epithelial cell layer. If you remember, these are villi and they will have microvilli. Are there all of you? Villi with microvilli, और ये epithelial cell layer के अंदर फैट चले जाते हैं bile salt की मदद से. Now बहुत ध्यान से सुनना. 3 glycerides, 3 glycerides, which is now called as a triglyceride. 3 glycerol molecules, which is called as a triglyceride, gets coated by a protein. तो ट्राइग्लिसराइड के बाजू में एक प्रोटीन कोट आ जाता है, एंड ट्राइग्लिसराइड with the protein coat is now called as a chylomicron. What is 3-glyceride with the protein coat around it called as a chylomicron? These are called as chylomicrons, and chylomicrons now go from the intestinal epithelial cells into the villi. और villi के बीच में होते हैं lymph vessels, which are called as lacteals, and chylomicrons pass into lacteals, and lacteals will transport fat out of the intestine. So once again, bile salts break down fat, physical breakdown, which is called emulsification, into smaller droplets, which are called as micelles, and bile salts activate lipase. Lipase breaks down micelles into fatty acid and glycerol. Bile salts will surround the glycerol and transport it into the intestinal cells called epithelial cell layer. And in the epithelial cell layer, bile salts वापस निकल जाते हैं, bile salts उसको छोड़ देते हैं and come back in the intestine, and 3 glycerides along with a protein core. 3 glycerides called triglyceride gets coated with a protein which is now called as a chylomicron, and chylomicron gets absorbed into lymph vessels which are called as lacteals, and that way fat gets removed and absorbed from your intestine. So, I hope you all have understood this. This was absorption, and we'll take a small break over here and we will go into the next part. So, take care. I'll see you soon.